Hello, welcome to this month's monthly mini. My name is Val Madsen, and I am the Training and Development Specialist at Respite Association of Wisconsin. This is part of our monthly training series where we do a short 20 to 30 minute high-level overview of different training topics. This month, we're going to be talking about safety and crisis planning. So we are excited to have you with us. So planning for crisis and emergency situations is really important. Today, what we'll really be talking about is the safety planning, which might go into looking at what happens before a crisis and what are some things that you can do in order to prepare for it, how to create a crisis response plans, how to communicate with first responders or with other providers or other people on your team. And I'll also give you a couple of examples of some emergency response plans. So why even create a crisis and safety plan? So really, the first thing you have to figure out is what is the function of the plan? And also what is your role? Are you the parent or caregiver and you're needing support dealing with things that are happening in the home? Are you are you a parent and caregiver creating a plan for others that are interacting with your loved one? Are you a direct care worker or a provider or case manager, someone who is working with an individual and you want to support either the parent or caregiver or support the direct care workers that are working with the individual? Are you more concerned about community interactions and community crisis situations? Are you worried about how to engage emergency responders? Is this more a safety plan for school or a work setting? Really, what is the function of your plan? And this is where I start with a lot of my families is why are we creating this? And with the families I've worked with, some are creating it more so things are getting bigger, more so than I can handle as a parent or a caregiver in the home. I know I'm gonna need to call in support. Or situations are getting unsafe where the individual is starting to run away or elope or take off from school or work settings. And we know we're going to have to end up calling 911 or different emergency responders. So I want to be prepared for that. So really figuring out what is the function of that plan, because that will determine what it looks like, what things you're going to have in it, and how you're going to use it. The other thing you want to look at is who are you giving this plan to? Is this plan going to school? Is it going to the work setting? Is it specifically for the direct care workers? Is it for the parents and so that they know how to provide support in the home? Is it for those emergency responders or people who might be called in to assist? So once you can figure out those things, then we can really figure out what the plan is going to look like or what is involved in the plan. I should also mention that as we talk about crisis and safety plans, it could be anything. It might be, as I mentioned, kind of running off or elopement, someone that is in that situation. It might be more physical aggression, unsafe behavior towards others. It could be a medical emergency. That could also be a reason to create a crisis or safety plan. So there's all of these different things to consider when you're creating these plans. So it's also important to figure out what the roles of the team are when you're creating the plans and who's involved in the team. The individual and the family caregiver are essential members. They have to be part of this. If you are a care provider, a direct care worker, a case manager, a teacher, someone on the team that really think that this would be a very useful tool, that's fantastic, but you really do have to make sure that the parent, the caregiver, the individual, as much as they can, are part of this safety planning process so that they have important input. Sometimes other team members might provide input as well, but again, it goes back to why are you using this plan as far as what input you need. So the case manager or facilitator, or maybe the teacher might take the lead in writing the plan, but it really needs to be reviewed by the family caregiver, the individual if possible, to, again, have everyone on the same page. Really make sure this is a very person-centered, family-centered plan of attack. So now we're going to talk about sections of a crisis plan. There's going to be lots of sections that I'm going to talk about, but not all of them are going to be included in your plan. Again, it goes back to what is the function of your plan? We talk a lot about functions of behavior so that we can figure out how to respond. Well, same thing. What is the function of your plan so we can figure out what needs to be in here? Each plan will also look very different. There's not like a set, these things need to be in this plan, because it's going to be very dependent on that individual and what that individual needs or what that family needs. So these are all possible sections, and we'll go more in depth on what is included in these sections. So contact information, current status, baseline, typical demeanor, concerns or needs, triggers, warning signs, environmental considerations, proactive actions, interventions, and then recovery. And so let's talk about each one of these a little more in depth. So in the contact information section, very easy, basic information. So name, date of birth, address, height, weight, parent, guardian contact information, maybe other contacts, case manager, residential support manager, school or vocational support people, team members. It doesn't have to be everyone. It really should be who in this emergency crisis, who are you contacting? So typically the parents and guardians would be on there, parent or guardian would be on there, the family caregiver, and then maybe like the team manager or the case facilitator, whatever that looks like. If this is a school plan, then it would be maybe 1 or 2 school staff. Sometimes you'll have the picture of the individual, especially if this is a plan that will be given to emergency responders or the police department, something that they have, so that they can have a picture associated with the individual that they might be assisting or supporting. You might not need all of this information either. So I'll show you an example of a plan where really it's just name and date of birth, because the function of the plan is more an internal document for people who are already working with the individual that has the parent and guardian information that doesn't is part of the team, so they don't need the contact information for everybody. So again, it goes back to that function of what your plan is. Then there might be a section that covers, the current status, the baseline, where the person is in their kind of typical demeanor. So this would be general information that might include the background of the information. So maybe the strengths of the individual. Johnny is a very outgoing teenager that really enjoys this, and this. Makes great connections with people, whatever it might be. Likes, dislikes. So especially for like a community plan for emergency responders, having a few things, Sally is really into animals and loves horses and anything to do with horses. Well, that could be a way as an emergency responder that I might be able to connect with Sally if that situation came about. Any community involvement, Johnny really enjoys visiting these places and lists the places in the community, especially for like elopement issues. That might be really good to know, because then, I can check these areas because these are places that he really likes to go. Lives at home with mom and dad, lives in an adult family home with a roommate, works at, and whatever the place is, attends school at, all of those things. That might be good information to put in here as well. Family members or other important people, lives at home with mom, dad, siblings, and pets, something like that. And then maybe the diagnosis, if it's relevant, it might not be relevant. And so it's one of those things that you want to be cautious about disclosing diagnoses if you might not need to. So that would be something, if it makes sense, again, depending on the function of the plan and what you're going to use it for, you may or may not need to disclose the diagnosis. The next section you might have would be concerns or needs. So what does crisis look like for this individual? What are specific behaviors that are of concern? What is the reason for your plan? So if this is a medical crisis plan, what are the specific behaviors? Low sugar, diabetes causes increased behaviors. But I don't like increased behaviors. I want to know exactly what that means. Individual becomes, unable to move, becomes very stubborn, is really having a hard time seeing the perspectives of others. Be very specific on what those specific behaviors look like. If it's a seizure disorder, what does that crisis look like? If it's physical aggression, what does that mean? Does that mean that someone might become verbally elevated first, or someone who's nonverbal or not speaking? If someone's non-speaking, what does that look like for them? So what are really the concerns? Why do you have this plan? And then triggers leading to the crisis could be a second. So what situations or conditions lead to the crisis? What are some trigger signs, early warning signs? What caused this move away from baseline? A lot of times this can be seen and known. Other times it might be, he goes from 0 to 100 and I'm not sure why. Other times it's like, oh yeah, these are the things in the past that have caused him to escalate. Warning signs. What does the individual like? What changes do you see in that person? Are there any key phrases or actions that the individual says or does? So really making sure that you're understanding from the individual's point of view, what does that look like for them? How does their demeanor change, their baseline change? What might they say? What might they do? For if it's a medical situation and seizures, sometimes the aura right before the seizure, there's certain things that happen, and that would be under the warning signs. I've worked with some clients that tend to make increased eye contact and really strong eye contact when they're starting to get elevated. So that would be a warning sign. So again, the change of the individual. Environmental considerations. Are there any risk factors or safety concerns in the home environment? So I've seen some crisis plans, particularly for the counties, that are very in-depth, 4 or 5 pages, a lot of long information paragraphs, lots of narrative. And it might say there are, firearms in the home, they are kept locked in a safe. Or there are animals or pets in the home. That would be a possible risk factor. If someone might show some aggressive behaviors, does that influence or include the animals, and what does that look like? Because that could be a safety concern in the environment. Is there safe space available at home? Can the person go to either a room, a sensory room, their bedroom, in order to be in a safe place? What are some community considerations? If we're out and about, what does that look like for safety? Do I need help getting that individual to a car? What other things in the environment might I need to keep in mind? Sensory considerations. Are there noises, movement needs, light versus dark? So as this person starts to elevate or starts to agitate, become anxious, however you want to phrase that for each individual, do they need to go to a dark place? Do they need more movement? So is it one of those things where, okay, now we're going to go for a walk because that's going to help them calm down? Do they need less noise? What does that look like? And are there any people or resources that are needed? So as someone starts to elevate, is it that they need to come and call other people in? Is it staff at work or school? Is it a neighbor? Is it other natural support, safe people that are important for this individual to be in contact with, including the parents or guardians or family caregivers? It might be, part of your plan might be contacting mom or dad so that they are able to have that connection. Proactive actions. So what works well to stay in the baseline state? What supports are needed? What helps to avoid crisis situations? So routines, personal space, what reinforcements work really well? Is it important to have breaks? Is there sensory items, interactions with people? This could be a ton of things, but what are some things that work really well? Do using visual supports work really well? Using first then statements or letting the person know what's coming up next. Looking at, transitional phrasing. Is that something that's really important to keep the individual in their baseline state? And then what interventions and strategies do you need during a crisis? And there might be different strategies for different people. So I've done one emergency plan, and I'll show an example where there's one section for this is a response from like the caregivers, parents, staff. And then this is a response that would be great from the emergency responders. So that might include, approaching without sirens if possible, not being real directive, being more calm, soft, down. Are there different strategies in different situations? I've had another plan where aggressive behavior has one set and then elopement has another set of how to respond to this individual. Does emergency medical situations look different than aggressive behavior or running or things like that? So depending on the situation, you might have multiple crisis plans, or you might have different sections within your plan to show what you need to show. Make sure it's really nice if you can do like a easy to follow interventions and strategies, like a bullet list, so that it's not, I have to read paragraphs to get the highlights. Make it very simple and, be direct, approach calmly, give space, allow space for movement, things like that. What is the plan to engage others? At what point is the caregivers called, 911, the county crisis line, anything like that? Home versus community safe spaces. Where can you go if you are in the community or if you're at home? What does that intervention look like and where is a safe space to go? And then looking at recovery and after the crisis. How do you know when someone has moved into the stage? What does that look like for that individual? How does processing and debriefing look like? For some individuals, you might be able to say, oh, so what happened? Let's talk about this. And others, you might have to go at their own speed of bringing it up. And maybe it's not for a couple of days. Maybe it's not something that we can process until a week later, depending on the individual. Each situation is very different. Who needs to be notified? If you're a direct care worker, what ways does the notification happen? Is it talking to the case manager, case facilitator? Is it to the county? Is it to the parents? What does that look like? And then how do you reestablish that connection and routine? What are some interactions and interventions in order to go back to where you were at? Now I want to show you a couple of examples, and I'll actually pop this up on another screen so that we can make it a little bit bigger. So let's do that. So this is one example of a safety plan, and this would be a picture, obviously not, a one-eyed individual with dinosaur horns, but you would put a picture, an updated picture here. This, name, date of birth, address, height. So this would be something used for maybe emergency personnel or people who don't have a lot of contact with this individual typically. So I would put lots of contact information, who we can contact if something were to happen. I would use this first section here to introduce the client. So where they live, live at home with parent, in an adult family home with roommates, family members that they see daily, what they like to do, interests, where they like to go, where they go to school or work, maybe diagnosis, supports, long-term, this person is receiving services through family care and CCS, other general information. You could also do a paragraph about what causes dysregulation triggers, what it looks like. I wouldn't go real in depth, but maybe. But most likely this form here would specifically be used for an emergency responder that's responding. So they don't necessarily need to know what triggered it. They need to know how to respond. And then you might have the reason for this document. So the reason for this document is to be proactive to best support this person when they, are in flight mode and run away from a situation, or when they are becoming physically aggressive with direct care workers or whatever it might be. So then this first section I would do, and again, this might be different for different clients and how that looks, or for different loved ones. So I've had one where, all right, these are some good approaches to create boundaries during physical distress. And then I might have another section very similar to this. These are ways or interventions when we're in a medical emergency, or maybe interventions when we're running away or eloping, or whatever phrasing your area uses. And this would just be a bulleted list of these are things you can do. I've also had one where most of the interventions are similar, and then I divide it into two parts here if there's anything different. So physical aggression and elopement. So there might be one or two bullets on how that's different. So like elopement, let so-and-so know that mom and dad are on their way. I had one client that if he feels that someone is coming near him, that he'll run more. So what can we do? Make sure that there's more than one person so that we can provide a wide net of support to make sure he stays safe and is not running into the road. Different things like that. And then there might be a section for emergency responders. So again, a bulleted list of how to approach, interact, de-escalate. What support does the caregiver provider need? So for one plan I recently worked on, it was helping emergency responders know that parents might call to get that individual safely into a car in order to get home, or to help the individual calm if mom or dad were to get hurt in the situation. Or school may call if the individual runs away. This is how to approach that individual. So again, different responses for emergency responders versus kind of the people who are with this individual all the time. So this is just I would do one page. I wouldn't do more than that. A bulleted high level list of exactly how to respond. Another example, this would be more so a crisis response plan that would not go to like a police officer or emergency responder. This might be a crisis response plan for direct care workers. So because of that, you don't need the contact information or things like that. So just name, date of birth, date, a short paragraph or sentence about maybe why this is needing a plan. And then really you're looking at two columns. This first column is how the individual is. So how they respond, how they act, what it looks like from the individual's point of view. And then this other column is how the support person or caregiver responds in these situations. And so you look at the different stages, and this I've seen done in lots of different ways, but stages of behavior. So the adaptive stage or the prevention stage, however you want to, but what is their typical demeanor baselines? So again, how that individual looks. So it might be smiling, cooperative, relaxed, able to transition between tasks, different things like that, where it's very specific to that individual and follows routine, enjoys being with others. And then as far as what to do for support, offer choices, foreshadow, use visuals, things like that. Stage 2 would be tension escalation. So now what does the individual look like? So this would be possible warning signs. What are things to be aware of? So this could include changes in facial expression, but be specific on what that means. Shoulders become tense, decreased eye contact, increased eye contact, pace of language is faster, volume increases, things like that. So really looking at this tension escalation, what does that look like specifically for that individual? And then how to respond. So this is a calm, redirect, modify the environment, but give specific techniques on how someone should respond. Are there any environmental changes that need to happen? Do you need to give more space? Is there specific statements that really help or that we should make sure we don't say? Do they need to go to a different room? Is there something we can say to help calm the situation so it doesn't escalate? And then stage 3 is that emotional, physical distress, crisis stage. What does that look like? What do interactions with others look like? What can be observed? Again, very specific for the individual. And then the safety strategies and safe boundaries. So how should the caregiver or provider respond? What helps de-escalate the situation as safely as possible? Who needs to be called? Is this a point where someone else is called in? 911? Is there certain specific directives? What does that look like for this individual? And then recovery and resolution. Again, what does it look like for that individual? Is that individual crying? Are they apologizing? Is normal breathing and posture returned? What does that look like for that specific person? And then how does the caregiver respond or provider respond? How to reconnect with that individual? How to debrief and what happens next? And then you should include anyone who's involved in creating the crisis response plan. So again, this can be a 1, maybe 2-page document, but what's really great about this one is it gives the caregiver or support staff exactly how to respond and different ways, and also an opportunity to be able to see, oh, I can see this individual changing in different ways. Where this first one really looks at someone outside stepping in to help. What can they do to best support the person? So those are the examples that I have. If anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to me at any point in time, and I will put up my contact information quick. So again, feel free to reach out to me at any point in time. I appreciate you being with us for this month's monthly mini, and I look forward to seeing you next month.